She was drugged and sold to the CEO by her evil mum, but the CEO had shocking plans. She thought she was meeting her mother for lunch. Instead, she woke up in a luxury penthouse, sold like property. Her own mother took the money and walked away. The man who bought her? A cold, powerful CEO with a terrifying reputation. She expects cruelty. She prepares for the worst. But then something doesn't make sense. He doesn't touch her. He gives her freedom. And he reveals a truth that changes everything. He didn't buy her for desire. He bought her for revenge, because her mother once destroyed his family. And now she's caught in the middle of a plan that could ruin them all. But when mercy enters the room, revenge starts to crack. Will forgiveness cost him everything? And can a woman betrayed by her own mother choose grace instead of revenge? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. And if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The morning sunlight streamed through Charlie Johnson's bedroom window, casting a warm glow that matched her cautiously hopeful mood. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mother, Lorraine, and Charlie's heart did its usual anxious flutter before she opened it. "Darling, let's do lunch today. That new place downtown, Bistro Elegante. My treat. Wear something nice." Charlie sat on the edge of her bed, running her fingers through her shoulder-length brown hair as she read the message again. Her mother rarely invited her to lunch these days, and when she did, it usually came with strings attached. But there was something different about Lorraine's recent behavior, a softness that Charlie hadn't seen in years. Last week, Lorraine had actually complimented Charlie's work at the community center. The week before that, she'd sent flowers just because. Small gestures, but they felt like drops of water in a desert of maternal affection Charlie had known most of her life. "Please be real this time," Charlie whispered to herself as she stood in front of her closet, carefully selecting a navy blue dress that her mother had once approved of. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened her grandmother's pearl necklace, the one piece of family jewelry Lorraine hadn't managed to claim for herself. Charlie's phone chimed again. "Wear the pearls, sweetheart. Important people notice appearances." A familiar knot formed in Charlie's stomach. Her mother's obsession with appearances had been a constant source of tension throughout her life. But today, Charlie chose to see it as maternal concern rather than criticism. She was 28 years old, and maybe, just maybe, her mother was finally seeing her as an adult worthy of real connection. The drive to Bistro Elegante took 20 minutes, during which Charlie practiced the breathing exercises her therapist had taught her. "Stay present," she reminded herself. "Stay hopeful but grounded." Lorraine was already seated when Charlie arrived, looking elegant as always in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Charlie's monthly rent. Her mother's face lit up with a smile that reached her eyes, something rare enough that Charlie felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Darling." Lorraine stood, embracing Charlie with unusual warmth. Her expensive perfume enveloped Charlie in a cloud of memories, both good and painful. "You look lovely. The pearls were the perfect choice." Charlie settled into her chair, trying to quiet the part of her that was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The restaurant was exactly her mother's style, all crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths, with prices that made Charlie grateful she wasn't paying. "I took the liberty of ordering us some drinks," Lorraine said, gesturing to 2 champagne flutes filled with a pale pink liquid. "It's their signature cocktail, strawberry champagne with a hint of rose. You'll love it." Charlie usually didn't drink at lunch, especially not with her mother, but Lorraine's smile was so encouraging, so seemingly genuine. "You deserve to relax, sweetheart. When was the last time we had a proper mother-daughter date?" "Thank you, Mum," Charlie said, picking up her glass. The drink was pretty, garnished with a single floating rose petal. She took a small sip, not wanting to appear ungrateful. It was sweet, with an unusual undertaste she couldn't quite identify. "I've been thinking," Lorraine began, leaning forward slightly, "about how hard I've been on you over the years. Perhaps I wasn't always the most understanding mother." Charlie's heart skipped a beat. Was this really happening? After all these years of criticism, manipulation, and emotional distance, was her mother actually acknowledging her behavior? "It's okay, Mom," Charlie said softly, taking another sip to hide her trembling lips. "We all do our best with what we know at the time." "You're too kind, darling. Always have been." Lorraine's voice seemed to come from further away, though she hadn't moved. Charlie blinked, trying to focus on her mother's face, which had become strangely blurry around the edges. The room began to tilt slightly, like a ship in gentle waves. Charlie gripped the edge of the table, her fingers feeling oddly numb. "Mom?" she said, her tongue feeling thick in her mouth. "I don't feel right." "Just relax, sweetheart." Lorraine's voice floated through the growing fog in Charlie's mind. "Everything will be fine if you just relax." Charlie tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The chandelier lights above began to swirl together in a dazzling display that made her stomach lurch. She could hear her mother's voice, still speaking in that oddly soothing tone, but the words were becoming impossible to understand. Through the haze, a terrible clarity struck Charlie. This wasn't reconciliation. This wasn't love. This was something else entirely, something that made her heart pound, with primal fear even as her consciousness began to slip away. "Mom, what did you—" The words came out slurred, barely audible. Charlie's head felt too heavy to hold up, her vision narrowing to a dim tunnel. The last thing she saw was her mother's face, no longer warm and loving, but wearing an expression Charlie had seen too many times before, calculated, satisfied, victorious. As darkness crept in from the edges of her vision, Charlie's final coherent thought wasn't of anger or even surprise. It was a quiet, devastating recognition. Trusting her mother had been a mistake, possibly her last one. The elegant restaurant, with its crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths, began to fade away. The gentle clink of fine china and murmur of conversation grew distant, replaced by a rushing sound in Charlie's ears. Her head slumped forward, and consciousness slipped away like water through her fingers, leaving her completely vulnerable in the presence of the one person who should have protected her above all others. Consciousness returned like waves lapping at a distant shore. Charlie first became aware of softness beneath her, different from her own well-worn mattress at home. The sheets felt impossibly smooth against her skin, carrying the crisp scent of expensive laundry service. Her eyelids felt heavy, refusing to open right away. Her head throbbed with each heartbeat, a dull ache that made even the thought of movement unbearable. Something wasn't right. This wasn't her bed. This wasn't her room. The panic began as a small flutter in her chest, growing stronger as fragments of memory pierced through the fog in her mind. Lunch with her mother. A pink drink. The world spinning. Charlie forced her eyes open, squinting against soft light filtering through sheer curtains that stretched from floor to ceiling. The room slowly came into focus. A spacious bedroom decorated in shades of cream and pale blue, furnished with pieces that spoke of wealth and careful curation. A plush armchair sat in one corner, draped with what looked like cashmere. The nightstand held a delicate crystal water carafe that probably cost more than her entire bedroom set. She tried to sit up, her arms shaking with the effort. The room tilted slightly, and she pressed her palms against her temples, willing the dizziness to pass. What had her mother done? Where was she? The knock that came at the door made her jump, her heart leaping into her throat. It wasn't aggressive, 3 precise, measured taps, but it sent fear coursing through her veins nonetheless. Charlie pulled the soft duvet closer, as if it could shield her from whatever waited on the other side. The door opened with deliberate slowness. A man entered, tall and impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that highlighted his broad shoulders. His movements were controlled, purposeful, like someone used to commanding attention without having to demand it. Dark eyes assessed her from a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so carefully blank of emotion. "Miss Johnson." His voice matched his appearance, deep, measured, devoid of warmth. "I'm Roman Caldwell. This is my penthouse." Charlie's mouth felt dry, her tongue sticking to the roof of her mouth. She forced herself to speak anyway, hating how her voice trembled. "Why am I here?" Roman remained by the door, maintaining a distance that somehow made her more nervous rather than less. His posture was perfect, hands clasped loosely in front of him. "You were brought here under an arrangement made by your mother." The words hit Charlie like a physical blow. Arrangement. Such a clean, professional word for something that felt so violent. "What kind of arrangement?" she whispered, though part of her already knew, had known since she'd first opened her eyes in this beautiful prison. "A financial one." Roman's voice remained steady, matter of fact. "Your mother approached me with a proposition. She offered something she believed I would find valuable in exchange for clearing her considerable debts." Charlie felt bile rise in her throat. The room seemed to spin again, though this time it had nothing to do with whatever drug had been in that drink. "She sold me." The words came out broken, barely audible. In essence, yes. Roman's directness was almost cruel in its honesty, though I suspect she presented it to herself in more palatable terms. Tears burned behind Charlie's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of this man who had bought her like a piece of property. "And what exactly do you expect from this arrangement?" Something flickered across Roman's face then, so brief she might have imagined it. "What I expect," he said carefully, "is for you to remain here until certain matters are resolved. You will be provided with everything you need. No one will touch you." The last sentence hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Charlie wrapped her arms around herself, struggling to process his words. The restraint in his voice, in his posture, confused her more than anger or cruelty would have. "I don't understand," she said finally. "You don't need to understand." Roman's hand moved to the door handle. "Rest, someone will bring you dinner later." He paused, those dark eyes fixing on her face one more time. "And Miss Johnson, don't attempt to leave. The security system is extensive, and I would rather not have to restrict your movement within the penthouse." The door closed behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in Charlie's ears. She stared at the space where he had stood, her mind racing with questions she was afraid to answer. Her mother had sold her to this stranger, this man who spoke of ownership with such calm detachment, yet promised no one would touch her. The contradiction made her head spin worse than the lingering effects of whatever drug still coursed through her system. Charlie sank back against the pillows, her body trembling with delayed shock and fear. The soft light continued to filter through those expensive curtains. The room remained silent and beautiful, but now every element of luxury felt like another bar in a gilded cage. She was trapped in this elegant prison, at the mercy of a man whose intentions remained as carefully guarded as his emotions. And somewhere out there, her mother was free of her debts, having traded her own daughter to clear them. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain, leaving Charlie alone with the devastating knowledge that the one person who should have protected her had instead sold her to the highest bidder. Charlie woke to soft morning light filtering through the curtains, her head clearer, but her heart still heavy. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, hoping it had all been a terrible dream. But the unfamiliar silk sheets and elegant furnishings confirmed her new reality. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage, sold by her own mother to a stranger. A quiet sound from beyond the door caught her attention. She waited, listening intently, but no one entered. After several minutes of silence, she carefully approached the door and turned the handle. It wasn't locked. That surprised her. Even more surprising was what she found in the hallway. A covered tray sat on an elegant side table alongside a neatly folded stack of clothing and a wicker basket filled with high-end toiletries. Charlie stared at the items, her throat tight. She had expected to be treated like property, to face immediate humiliation. Instead, here was consideration she didn't quite trust. She brought everything inside, setting the tray on a small table by the window. Her hands shook slightly as she lifted the cover, revealing a breakfast that looked like something from a luxury hotel. Fresh fruit, yogurt, whole grain toast, and a steaming cup of coffee. A small note card sat beside the plate, written in precise handwriting. The bathroom is stocked with everything you might need. These clothes should fit, R.C. Charlie touched the clothing, soft grey pants in a stretchy material, a loose-fitting blue sweater, and basic but expensive-looking undergarments. All new, all in her size. She wasn't sure if she should be grateful or more terrified by this level of preparation. After using the attached bathroom and changing into the new clothes, she forced herself to eat, though each bite felt like ash in her mouth. Her mother's betrayal sat like a stone in her stomach, making even the perfectly prepared food taste bitter. The hours crawled by. Charlie explored the room, which was beautiful but offered no clues about her situation. There were no phones, no computers, and the large windows, while offering stunning views of the city, didn't open. She tried to pray, but the words stuck in her throat. Around mid-afternoon, another knock came at the door. This time, Roman entered without waiting for a response. He looked exactly as he had the day before, impeccably dressed, completely controlled, impossible to read. "Miss Johnson?" he said, his voice as neutral as his expression. "Please come with me." Charlie hesitated, then followed him out of the room. They walked down a hallway lined with abstract art pieces that probably cost more than she made in a year, emerging into a sprawling living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city below, and elegant furniture in shades of cream and grey filled the space. "Sit," Roman said, gesturing to a plush armchair. He took a seat across from her, maintaining that careful distance she'd noticed before. "We need to discuss the parameters of your stay here." Charlie perched on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Parameters?" "Yes." Roman reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, which he placed on the coffee table between them. "Inside you'll find a credit card in your name, along with the relevant documentation. The limit is generous, but not unlimited. You're free to order whatever you need. Clothes, books, personal items." Charlie stared at the envelope without touching it. "Why?" "Because despite what your mother might have led you to believe, I'm not interested in degrading you." His voice held a hint of something. Anger. Disgust. But it wasn't directed at her. "You have access to the entire penthouse except my private office and bedroom. Your room, the one you're in now, has a lock. I suggest you use it." "I don't understand," Charlie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why am I here if you don't—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Roman's jaw tightened slightly. "Your presence here serves a purpose, but that purpose does not include what you're afraid of. No one will touch you, Miss Johnson. You have my word on that." Your word, Charlie repeated, a bitter laugh threatening to escape. The word of a man who bought a person? Something dangerous flickered in Roman's dark eyes, but his voice remained steady. I didn't buy you, Miss Johnson. I bought your mother's debt, all of it. Your presence here is insurance. Insurance against what? That's not something you need to concern yourself with. Roman stood, smoothing his jacket with practiced hands. You'll find the kitchen fully stocked. Feel free to prepare your own meals or order in. If you need anything, press 0 on any of the house phones. That will connect you to my assistant. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Don't try to leave. The elevator requires a code, and the security system is extensive. This situation is temporary, Miss Johnson. How comfortable or uncomfortable it is depends largely on you. After he left, Charlie sat in the beautiful room for a long time, trying to make sense of it all. The envelope on the table seemed to mock her. Freedom to buy anything she wanted, except her actual freedom. Roman's cold courtesy was almost harder to handle than cruelty would have been. At least cruelty would have matched the brutality of her mother's actions. Eventually, she explored the penthouse, finding it exactly as Roman had described. The kitchen was indeed fully stocked, the living areas luxuriously appointed. Her room, she refused to think of it as her room, had a lock, as promised. Everything was perfect, pristine, and utterly suffocating. As night fell, Charlie returned to her room, double-checking the lock before changing into silk pajamas she'd found in the dresser. She knelt beside the bed, pressing her forehead against clasped hands. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please help me understand why this is happening. Help me find strength. Help me find answers. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she continued praying, pouring out her fear and confusion to the only one she could truly trust now. The city lights twinkled beyond her window, beautiful and unreachable. Charlie remained on her knees, whispering prayers into the darkness, clinging to faith when everything else had been stripped away. Her mother's betrayal, Roman's mysterious purpose, her own uncertain future. She laid it all before God, asking not for escape, but for the wisdom and courage to face whatever came next. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors of the penthouse. Charlie woke to the gentle chime of her phone. Another gift from Roman, displaying a message that made her stomach clench. Breakfast will be served at 8 o'clock in the dining room. She checked the time. 7:45. Even in captivity, it seemed, punctuality mattered. Charlie dressed carefully in a simple blue sweater and black pants from the wardrobe provided, trying to steady her trembling hands as she brushed her hair. The dining room was a study in understated luxury, with a long mahogany table that could easily seat 12. Roman stood at the far end, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light. He turned as she entered, gesturing to a chair positioned several seats away from his own. "Good morning, Miss Johnson," he said, his voice carrying that now familiar mix of courtesy and distance. "I trust you slept well?" Charlie settled into the indicated chair, noting how the careful spacing between them seemed to be a constant theme. "As well as can be expected," she replied softly. A uniformed server, Charlie hadn't even known there was staff, appeared silently, placing a cup of steaming coffee before her. The rich aroma filled her senses, momentarily distracting her from the tension in the room. "Cream? Sugar?" Roman asked, watching her over the rim of his own cup. "Black is fine." Charlie wrapped her hands around the warm porcelain, grateful for something to hold on to. The server returned with plates of fresh fruit, pastries, and eggs Benedict. Under different circumstances, it would have been a lovely breakfast. As it was, Charlie could barely manage small bites, her appetite dampened by anxiety. Roman set his coffee cup down with deliberate care. "I imagine you have questions." Charlie met his gaze steadily. "Dozens, but I doubt you'll answer them." "Actually," he said, surprising her, "that's precisely why I asked you to join me this morning. It's time you understood why you're here." The server disappeared, leaving them alone in the vast dining room. Roman's expression shifted, something harder emerging beneath his controlled exterior. "7 years ago," he began, "your mother approached my younger brother, Marcus, with what appeared to be a legitimate investment opportunity. She had credentials, references, everything needed to appear trustworthy. Marcus was—" Roman paused, pain flickering across his features. "He was more trusting than I am, more optimistic." Charlie's heart began to race, dreading what was coming next. Lorraine spent months gaining his confidence, presenting fabricated documents and false projections. By the time Marcus realized what was happening, she had systematically drained his company's accounts through a series of clever manipulations. The business collapsed. Marcus lost everything. "No," Charlie whispered, but deep down she wasn't really surprised. This was exactly the kind of thing her mother was capable of. The stress destroyed his marriage. Roman continued, his voice growing colder. "The shame of bankruptcy, the betrayal, it was too much. My brother took his own life 3 months later." Charlie felt the blood drain from her face. She set her coffee cup down with shaking hands, afraid she might drop it. "I'm so sorry," she managed. "I had no idea." "No, you wouldn't have," Roman agreed. "Your mother is very good at covering her tracks. The authorities could never prove anything. She walked away clean, leaving my family in ruins." "And now?" Charlie asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Now I've spent years building a case against her. I've traced her patterns, documented her schemes. But Lorraine Johnson is careful. She never leaves herself vulnerable." His dark eyes fixed on Charlie. "Until now." Understanding dawned, horrible and clear. "You're using me as bait," she said quietly. "Your mother's one weakness is her need for control, particularly control over you. When she realizes you're here, truly here, she'll become desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." Charlie felt sick. "So when she sold me to you, I made sure she thought she was orchestrating the whole thing. In reality, I've been waiting for an opportunity like this. Your presence here will force her into the open, make her careless. And when she slips up, I'll have everything I need to bring her down, legally, permanently." Tears burned behind Charlie's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You're talking about destroying her. I'm talking about justice," Roman corrected sharply. "For my brother. For his children, who grew up without a father. For everyone else she's hurt along the way." "Including me?" Charlie asked. "Because that's what you're doing, you know, hurting me, using me as a weapon against my own mother." "Your mother sold you without a second thought," Roman reminded her, though something like discomfort crossed his face. "She doesn't deserve your protection." Charlie stood slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. "You're right. What my mother did, to your brother, to others, to me, it's unforgivable. But I won't help you hurt her." Roman's expression hardened. "This isn't a request, Miss Johnson. You're here until I get what I need." "I understand that," Charlie said quietly. "You can keep me here, but you can't make me be part of your revenge." She turned away, pausing at the dining room door. "I'm sorry about your brother, Mr. Caldwell, truly, but adding more pain to the world won't bring him back." She left before he could respond, retreating to her room where she could finally let the tears fall. Her mother's betrayal, already devastating, now carried the weight of other lives destroyed. And Roman, for all his surface courtesy, was willing to use her just as callously as Lorraine had. Charlie sank to her knees beside the bed, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The truth was almost too heavy to bear, that she was nothing more than a pawn in a game of revenge between two people consumed by pain and bitterness. But even as her heart broke, she knew she couldn't be part of it. She wouldn't let their darkness turn her into something she wasn't. "I won't help you hurt anyone," she had told Roman. It wasn't defiance or nobility that made her say it, just the quiet certainty that adding to the cycle of pain would never bring healing. Even if it cost her everything, she had to hold on to that truth. The sunset painted the penthouse in shades of amber and gold, but Charlie barely noticed the beauty. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, arms wrapped around herself, trying to process the weight of everything she'd learned. The city stretched out below, millions of lives moving forward while hers seemed frozen in this glass cage. Heavy footsteps approached from behind. Charlie didn't turn around. "Ms. Johnson." Roman's voice was measured, controlled. "We need to discuss your situation." Charlie closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. "What's left to discuss? You've made it clear I'm just a means to an end. I'm offering you a choice." Roman moved to stand several feet away, his reflection visible in the window glass. "You can leave right now. Take your clothes, whatever personal items you brought. Walk out that door with no obligations to me or this situation." Charlie turned to face him, surprised. Just like that. Just like that. His expression remained unreadable. "Or you can choose to stay temporarily until this matter is resolved legally. I won't force you to actively participate, but your presence alone will serve the purpose I need." "And those are my only options?" Charlie asked quietly. "Those are the only ones I'm offering." Roman's jaw tightened. "I won't keep you prisoner, Miss Johnson. That would make me no better than your mother." The mention of her mother sent a fresh wave of pain through Charlie's chest. She walked away from the windows, needing space to think. "I need time to consider this." "You have until midnight," Roman said. "After that, the choice is made." Charlie nodded once and retreated to her room, closing the door softly behind her. The moment she was alone, her carefully maintained composure cracked. She sank onto the bed, hands trembling as she covered her face. Anger came first, hot and unfamiliar in her chest. Anger at her mother for using her like a bargaining chip. Anger at Roman for his cold manipulation. Anger at herself for being naive enough to trust either of them. Then came the shame, burning worse than the anger. How many times had she forgiven her mother's manipulations? How many times had she made excuses, telling herself that deep down Lorraine must love her? Now she knew the truth. She was nothing but a tool to be used, first by her mother, now by Roman. Charlie slid from the bed to her knees, fingers gripping the soft carpet. "God," she whispered, "I don't understand any of this. Why here? Why now? What am I supposed to do?" Tears fell silently as she poured out her confusion and hurt in prayer. The sun sank lower, shadows lengthening across the room, but Charlie remained there, wrestling with her choices. Leaving meant freedom from Roman's schemes. But where would she go? Her mother would find her eventually, she always did. And now that Charlie knew the truth about Lorraine's past crimes, could she really go back to pretending ignorance? Could she live with herself knowing her mother might be hurting others the same way she'd hurt Roman's brother? Staying meant being used as bait in Roman's revenge plot. The thought made her skin crawl. But what if there was another way? What if God had placed her here not for revenge but for redemption? Charlie sat back on her heels, wiping her eyes as clarity slowly emerged. She couldn't change the past, couldn't undo what her mother had done or ease Roman's pain, but she could choose how to move forward. She could choose to stay, not for revenge, but for truth, not to destroy, but to heal. The clock on her bedside table read 11:45 when Charlie finally stood. She smoothed her clothes, took a deep breath, and walked back to the living room where Roman waited. He stood by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel, staring into the flames. He didn't look up when she entered. "I'll stay," Charlie said quietly. Now Roman turned, surprise briefly breaking through his controlled expression. "You understand what that means?" "I understand what you want it to mean," Charlie replied. "But that's not why I'm staying." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm staying because I believe God put me here for a reason. Not for revenge, Mr. Caldwell. For something better than that." Roman's eyes narrowed. "If you think you can protect your mother—" "I'm not trying to protect anyone," Charlie interrupted gently. "I'm choosing to trust that there's a purpose in all of this, bigger than what either of us can see right now. And I'm choosing to believe that purpose isn't destruction." "That's rather naive, Miss Johnson." "Maybe," Charlie agreed. "But I'd rather be naive than bitter." She turned to go, pausing at the hallway. "Good night, Mr. Caldwell." As she walked back to her room, Charlie felt a strange peace settle over her. The situation hadn't changed. She was still essentially a prisoner, still caught between her mother's betrayal and Roman's revenge. But something inside her had shifted. For the first time in her life, she wasn't reacting to someone else's manipulations. She was choosing her own path, guided by faith rather than fear. The morning sunlight painted golden patterns across the penthouse kitchen as Charlie sipped her tea. She had barely slept, but a strange peace lingered from her decision the night before. The quiet was broken by Roman's measured footsteps approaching from his office. "I have errands to run today," he announced, his voice carefully neutral. "You'll be accompanying me." Charlie looked up, surprised by this first venture outside since arriving. "Where are we going?" "Various places. There's someone I want you to meet." Roman's tone left no room for discussion as he checked his watch. "We leave in 30 minutes. Charlie nodded, returning to her room to change. She chose a simple blue dress from the clothes Roman had provided, its modest cut providing some small comfort. Her reflection showed dark circles under her eyes, but there was a new steadiness in her gaze that hadn't been there before. The elevator ride down was silent, tension hanging between them like a heavy curtain. Roman's driver waited with a sleek, black car, opening the door with practiced efficiency. Charlie slid into the cool leather interior, noting how Roman maintained careful distance even in the confined space. They drove through the city's busy streets, finally stopping before a stone church with stained glass windows catching the morning light. Charlie's heart lifted at the sight. She hadn't been inside a church since before her mother's betrayal. "Pastor Evelyn Moore is expecting you," Roman said, still staring straight ahead. "I have other matters to attend to. The driver will wait." Charlie stepped out into the warm sunshine, her legs shaky with newfound freedom. The heavy wooden doors opened easily, revealing a peaceful sanctuary. Soft light filtered through the colored glass, creating pools of blue and gold on the worn carpet. A woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes approached, her smile genuine and warm. "You must be Charlie. I'm Pastor Evelyn." She extended her hand in welcome. "Would you like to sit and talk?" Charlie felt tears threatening at this simple kindness. She nodded, following Pastor Evelyn to a small office filled with books and comfortable chairs. The scent of coffee and old paper created an atmosphere of safety. Roman explained some of your situation. Pastor Evelyn began gently. But I'd like to hear it from you, if you're willing. The story spilled out then. Her mother's manipulation, the drugged lunch, waking in Roman's penthouse, the revelation of old wounds and revenge plots. Through it all, Pastor Evelyn listened without judgment, her presence steady and compassionate. "You've been carrying such heavy burdens," she said when Charlie finished. "But I hear something remarkable in your words. You're not seeking revenge." Charlie wiped her eyes. "I can't. It would make me just like them. But sometimes I wonder if that makes me weak." "Choosing mercy isn't weakness, Charlie. It takes far more strength to break a cycle of harm than to perpetuate it." Pastor Evelyn leaned forward. "Your worth isn't determined by how others have treated you. You are precious to God, and He has a purpose for you even in this difficult season." They talked for nearly 2 hours, Pastor Evelyn's wisdom helping Charlie see her situation with new clarity. As their time drew to a close, the pastor pressed a small Bible into Charlie's hands. "Remember," she said, "you may feel trapped, but your spirit remains free. No one can take that from you." The drive back to the penthouse was just as quiet, but Charlie clutched the Bible like a lifeline. That evening, after a solitary dinner, she retreated to her room. Kneeling beside her bed, as had become her habit, she began to pray aloud. "Thank you, God, for your mercy today. Thank you for Pastor Evelyn's kindness. Lord, I don't understand why all this is happening, but I trust you. Please help me show mercy even when it's hard. Help me remember that vengeance isn't mine to take." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "And Lord, please help Mr. Caldwell find healing instead of revenge. Help him see that justice doesn't have to mean destruction. Thank you for your protection and love. Amen." Unknown to Charlie, Roman stood frozen in the hallway, her words drifting through the partially open door. Her prayer for mercy, for him, struck something deep inside his carefully constructed walls. He moved silently to his office, closing the door before sinking into his leather chair. The city lights sparkled beyond his windows, but Roman barely saw them. Charlie's gentle faith challenged everything he'd built his life around since his brother's destruction. Justice meant making wrong things right. It meant consequences. It meant making sure people like Lorraine Johnson couldn't hurt anyone else. Didn't it? Roman opened his laptop, staring at the carefully gathered evidence against Lorraine. Years of meticulous planning, all designed to bring about her downfall. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, Charlie's words echoed in his mind. Please help him see that justice doesn't have to mean destruction. He sat there long into the night, his certainty shaken by the simple prayers of a woman who had every right to seek revenge, but chose mercy instead. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the penthouse's marble floors as Charlie made her way to the kitchen. 2 days had passed since her visit to Pastor Evelyn, and she'd begun finding small ways to make this strange situation meaningful. Samuel Reyes, Roman's driver, stood by the coffee maker in his crisp black suit. Charlie noticed how he always arrived early to prepare coffee for the staff. "Good morning, Mr. Reyes," she said warmly. "Would you like me to pour you a cup while you check the car?" Samuel's weathered face softened with surprise. "Thank you, Miss Johnson. That's very kind. Please, call me Charlie." She reached for a clean mug. "How do you take it?" "Black with 1 sugar." He paused, studying her with gentle eyes. "Not many notice the staff, Miss Charlie." She stirred the sugar into his coffee, remembering countless times her mother had dismissed service workers as invisible. "Everyone deserves kindness, Mr. Reyes, especially those who make our lives easier every day." From his office doorway, Roman watched the exchange silently. Charlie handed Samuel the coffee with a genuine smile, and the usually stoic driver's posture relaxed slightly. Later that morning, Charlie found Maria, the housekeeper, struggling with fresh linens for the guest rooms. Without hesitation, she stepped in to help, folding sheets and matching pillowcases. "Oh no, miss," Maria protested. "Mr. Caldwell wouldn't like—" "Mr. Caldwell hired you to keep the house in order, not to struggle alone," Charlie said gently. "Besides, my grandmother taught me the proper way to fold fitted sheets. Let me show you her trick." Roman observed from around the corner as Charlie demonstrated the technique, her movements precise and her manner respectful. Maria's initial discomfort melted into appreciation as they worked together, sharing quiet conversation in Spanish and English. Throughout the day, Charlie's presence seemed to soften the formal atmosphere of the penthouse. She thanked the maintenance worker who fixed a squeaky door, helped the window cleaner move furniture, and left encouraging notes for the evening staff. In his office, Roman scrolled through surveillance photos from his investigators. Lorraine Johnson appeared in several, her elegant facade masking the predator beneath. She'd been asking questions, making calls, trying to discover where her daughter had disappeared to. His phone buzzed. Another update. Lorraine had contacted 3 different banks, attempting to access accounts she thought Charlie might have opened. Her desperation was growing, along with her greed. Roman's jaw tightened. Everything was proceeding according to plan. So why did victory taste increasingly bitter? The phone rang again. This time, a familiar number. "Aunt Ruth," he answered, his voice softening slightly. "Roman." His aunt's voice carried both warmth and concern. "I've been praying about you. About this situation with Charlie Johnson." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Aunt Ruth, listen to me, nephew." Her tone grew firm. "I know what Lorraine Johnson did to our family. I watched your brother crumble. I held you through those dark days. Then you understand why this has to be done." "No, dear one. I understand why you think it has to be done." Ruth paused. "But revenge won't heal what's broken. It only breaks things further." Roman stood, pacing to the window. "This isn't about revenge. It's about justice." "Is it?" His aunt's question hung in the air. "Because from where I stand, using an innocent young woman as bait, even to catch someone guilty, crosses a line that may be hard to uncross." Charlie's safe here, protected. Being protected and being used are not mutually exclusive, Roman. Ruth's voice gentled. "I see how this young woman treats others with kindness, even from her cage. Perhaps God placed her in your path not as a weapon, but as a mirror." The conversation lingered in Roman's mind through Saturday and into Sunday morning. He found himself driving to Pastor Evelyn's church, parking in the back lot where few would notice his car. Slipping in as the service began, Roman took a seat in the last pew. The familiar hymns and prayers washed over him, stirring memories of Sundays with his family before everything fell apart. Pastor Evelyn's sermon focused on mercy, how it transforms both the given and receiver. Roman's hands clenched in his lap as she spoke about breaking cycles of harm, about choosing a higher path, even when justice seemed to demand vengeance. From his position in the back, Roman watched the congregation, ordinary people seeking hope, healing, and direction. He noticed how they greeted each other with genuine warmth, how they lifted their hands in worship without self-consciousness. As the final hymn began, Roman remained seated, letting the words sink deep into his carefully constructed defenses. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to question whether the path he'd chosen was truly about justice, or if he'd confused justice with the bitter satisfaction of watching someone else's world crumble, just as his had. The service ended, but Roman stayed in his pew, surrounded by empty chairs and echoing questions. The morning light streamed through stained glass, painting patterns of color across his hands that held the power to destroy Lorraine Johnson, but also the power to choose a different way. Charlie smoothed down her navy dress, studying her reflection in the bedroom mirror. The outfit Roman had sent over was elegant but modest, a knee-length sheath with three-quarter sleeves and simple pearl buttons. She touched the delicate cross necklace at her throat, drawing comfort from its familiar presence. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. "Are you ready?" Roman's voice carried through the door, unusually hesitant. "Just a moment," Charlie called back, slipping on the matching heels. When she opened the door, she found Roman waiting in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his expression unreadable as always. "The board meeting starts in 45 minutes, he said, checking his watch. "Samuel is waiting with the car." Charlie followed him to the elevator, noticing how he maintained a respectful distance while still staying close enough to appear protective. The ride down was silent, but not uncomfortable. They'd developed an odd sort of peace over the past week. Samuel greeted them with his usual warm smile, holding the car door open. "Good morning, Miss Johnson, Mr. Caldwell." "Good morning, Samuel," Charlie replied warmly. "How's your daughter feeling? Better, I hope." The driver's face lit up. "Much better, thank you for asking. The soup you sent really helped." Roman watched this exchange with carefully concealed interest. He'd noticed how Charlie remembered details about everyone's lives, how she treated each person as valuable, regardless of their position. As they drove through the city, Roman cleared his throat. "The Children's Hospital Foundation Board can be overwhelming at first, but you'll be fine. Just be yourself." Charlie turned from the window to study his profile. "Why did you really invite me today?" "Because you deserve to be seen as more than a prisoner," he answered after a long pause. "And because I'm tired of pretending you are one." The Foundation's offices occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown building. As they stepped into the boardroom, heads turned to observe them. Roman placed a gentle hand on Charlie's elbow, steering her toward two empty seats. "Roman, wonderful to see you." A silver-haired woman approached, curiosity evident in her sharp eyes. "And who is this lovely young lady?" Roman straightened, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "This is Charlie Johnson. She's under my protection and will be joining us today as my guest." The words "under my protection" rippled through the room like a stone dropped in still water. Charlie felt the weight of evaluating gazes, some concerned, others calculating. She lifted her chin slightly, meeting their looks with quiet dignity. Throughout the meeting, Charlie listened intently as the board discussed funding allocations and program expansions. When asked for her opinion on a proposed art therapy program, she spoke thoughtfully about the healing power of creative expression. Art gives children a voice when words fail them, she explained softly. Sometimes the biggest hurts can only be expressed through color and shape. Several board members nodded appreciatively, and Roman felt an unexpected surge of pride. Charlie wasn't just surviving this experience. She was shining. After the meeting, as they waited for Samuel to bring the car around, Roman's phone buzzed. His face hardened as he read the message. "What is it?" Charlie asked, though she suspected she knew. "Your mother." Roman's voice was tight. "Photos from today are already online. She's demanding to speak with me." Charlie wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm spring air. "She won't stop, you know. She'll keep pushing until she gets what she wants, or until everything burns down around her." "That's the plan," Roman said grimly. "Is it?" Charlie turned to face him fully. "Will watching her fall really heal what she broke? Or will it just create more broken pieces for someone else to cut themselves on?" Roman's jaw clenched. "She deserves—" "Maybe it's not about what she deserves," Charlie interrupted gently. "Maybe it's about who we choose to become in response to what she did." Those words followed Roman back to his office that evening. While Charlie ate dinner with Maria in the kitchen, he sat staring at his computer screen. The final phase of his revenge plan lay there in neat folders. Financial records, damning emails, carefully crafted evidence that would destroy Lorraine Johnson completely. He thought about his brother's vacant eyes after the collapse, about his parents' grief, about years of anger carefully nurtured into this perfect moment of retribution. Then he thought about Charlie's quiet strength, about her ability to choose mercy even when justice seemed to demand vengeance. He thought about Aunt Ruth's words about breaking cycles and Pastor Evelyn's sermon about transformation. Roman's hand hovered over the keyboard. With 3 keystrokes, he could set everything in motion. With 3 keystrokes, he could watch Lorraine Johnson's carefully constructed world crumble to dust. Instead, his fingers found different keys. Select all, delete, confirm. The files vanished, taking with them years of carefully planned revenge. Roman leaned back in his chair, expecting to feel regret or uncertainty. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. In the kitchen, he could hear Charlie's soft laughter mixing with Maria's as they cleaned up from dinner. The sound drifted through his office like a gentle reminder that some things were worth more than revenge, like the chance to become someone better than your pain would have made you. The evening sun painted golden stripes across the penthouse's hardwood floors as Charlie finished helping Maria with the dishes. The simple routine of drying plates and storing them away had become a comfort over the past weeks, a small piece of normalcy in an otherwise surreal situation. "Miss Charlie." Roman's voice came from the kitchen doorway, unusually gentle. "Could we talk for a moment?" Maria gave Charlie's arm a motherly pat before excusing herself. Charlie followed Roman to the living room, where the fading sunlight made everything seem softer somehow. He gestured for her to sit on the cream-colored sofa while he took the chair opposite. "I've made some decisions," Roman began, his hands clasped together. "I wanted you to be the first to know." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've cancelled everything, all of it. The plans against your mother, the evidence I'd gathered, the legal proceedings I'd prepared. It's gone." Charlie's breath caught in her throat. "All of it?" "Yes." Roman's eyes met hers steadily. "You were right. Revenge wouldn't heal anything. It would just create more wounds. So I'm taking a different path." He reached for a leather portfolio on the side table. "I'm setting up a fund to quietly restore money to those your mother harmed over the years. No publicity, no revenge, just restoration where possible, and—" He took a deep breath. "I'm severing all contact with Lorraine. Completely." Charlie sat very still, processing his words. All her life, people had chosen power over her, chosen manipulation, control, and greed over simple human kindness. Yet here was Roman Caldwell, who had every right to seek vengeance, choosing something better instead. "Why?" she whispered. Roman's expression softened. "Because you showed me there was another way. Your strength isn't in hurting others. It's in refusing to let pain turn you bitter. I want to learn from that." Tears pricked at Charlie's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you," she managed. "There's more," Roman continued, opening the portfolio. "I've prepared some documents for you to look over. The first is paperwork for an educational trust in your name. It will cover any degree program you choose to pursue, plus living expenses during your studies." Charlie's hands trembled as she accepted the papers. "I don't understand." "The second document," Roman pressed on, "is the lease agreement for an apartment in a secure building downtown. It's paid for 1 year in advance, with an option to renew on your own terms after that. The building has excellent security and it's close to several universities." He laid out more papers. There's also a modest investment account to help you start your independent life, and documents for a new car. Practical but reliable. Everything is in your name only. No strings attached. Charlie stared at the stack of papers, overwhelmed by their meaning. You're giving me freedom? No, Roman said quietly. I'm acknowledging the freedom that was always yours. These are just tools to help you use it. Maria appeared in the doorway then, announcing dinner was ready. The dining room table, usually so formal, felt different tonight. Maria had set it simply but beautifully, with fresh flowers in a crystal vase and the good china that spoke of celebration rather than obligation. As they ate the perfectly prepared meal, roasted chicken with herbs, fresh vegetables, and warm bread, the usual tension that hung between them had dissolved into something lighter. Their conversation flowed naturally, touching on Charlie's interests in art therapy and child psychology, fields she'd always dreamed of studying. The fall semester starts in 3 months, Roman mentioned, passing the bread basket. Plenty of time to apply if you're interested. Charlie smiled, really smiled, for what felt like the first time in years. I think I am. Interested, I mean. After dinner, as the sky outside turned purple with twilight, Roman handed Charlie one final envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, sealed. This is my formal apology, he explained, for my part in everything that happened. I know I can't undo it, but I want you to have this acknowledgement of both the wrong done and my commitment to make it right. Charlie held the envelope carefully, recognizing it for the precious thing it was. Not just an apology, but a key turning in a lock, opening the door to her future. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. Live your life, Roman replied simply. Build something beautiful from all this. That will be thanks enough. As Charlie returned to her room that night, carrying the documents that represented her new beginning, she felt lighter than she had in years. For the first time, tomorrow felt like a promise instead of a threat. She carefully placed the papers on her desk, running her fingers over their edges. Tangible proof that sometimes people could choose love over power, healing over hurt, and mercy over revenge. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared the city skyline when Charlie's phone buzzed with the first notification. She was sitting in the kitchen, enjoying her usual quiet breakfast of toast and coffee, when everything changed. The message was from Pastor Evelyn, a simple text that made her stomach drop. Praying for you. Don't look at the news. Of course, those 4 words made it impossible not to look. The headlines hit her like physical blows. Wealthy executive accused of exploitation. Woman claims abuse of power in Caldwell scandal. Mother reveals daughter's manipulation of business titan. Charlie's hands shook as she scrolled through article after article. Her mother's face stared back from every screen, perfectly composed, eyes glistening with manufactured tears as she spun tales of her daughter's calculated schemes to destroy Roman Caldwell's reputation. She's always been troubled, Lorraine was quoted saying. I tried to protect Roman from her manipulation, but she's very clever, very convincing. The toast turned to ash in Charlie's mouth. She pushed it away, feeling sick. Heavy footsteps in the hallway announced Roman's arrival. He appeared in the doorway, his normally pristine appearance slightly disheveled. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. I'm so sorry, Charlie whispered. Roman shook his head, his expression grim. This isn't your fault. Your mother is desperate. She knows I've cut off her access to everything. A commotion outside drew them to the windows. On the street below, photographers had gathered like vultures, their cameras pointed up at the penthouse. News vans lined the curb, reporters speaking rapidly into microphones. The board's called an emergency meeting, Roman said quietly. I have to go. Let me come with you." Charlie pleaded. "I can tell them the truth." "No." His voice was firm but gentle. "That's exactly what she wants, to draw you out, to make you defend yourself publicly. It would only feed the story." As Roman prepared to leave, Charlie watched him don his armor, straightening his tie, smoothing his jacket, squaring his shoulders. Samuel was waiting with the car in the underground garage, away from the cameras. Throughout the day, Charlie paced the penthouse like a caged animal, watching the story spiral. Social media exploded with speculation. Old acquaintances suddenly appeared on news shows, sharing concerns about her character. Her mother's carefully crafted narrative painted Charlie as a master manipulator who had targeted Roman for his wealth and influence. The worst part was watching Roman absorb it all without fighting back. He attended the board meeting, faced the accusations, but refused to expose the truth about Lorraine. Every statement from his office was measured, professional, and revealed nothing about the real situation. By evening, the media frenzy had reached a fever pitch. Security had to clear photographers from the building's entrance 3 times. Charlie's phone buzzed constantly with messages from unknown numbers, some offering support, others spewing hatred. When Roman finally returned, his tie was loose and his face drawn with exhaustion. Charlie met him in the living room, where the city lights twinkled beyond the windows like nothing had changed. "You have to leave," he said without preamble. Charlie felt the words like a physical blow, though she'd been expecting them. "Roman, I can fix this. Let me talk to the press." "No." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare show of frustration. "This isn't about the press or the board or even your mother anymore. It's about your safety. The stories are getting worse by the hour. People are angry, making threats. I won't risk you becoming a target. But everything we've built here will mean nothing if you get hurt." Roman's voice softened. "The apartment is ready. Samuel will take you there tonight, after the media crews change shifts. The security team is already in place." Charlie stood very still, feeling the weight of the moment. Everything was falling apart, just when it had started to make sense, just when she'd begun to believe in the possibility of good things. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for any of this to happen. You tried to help me, and I've ruined everything." Roman stepped forward, almost reaching for her before catching himself. "You haven't ruined anything. You showed me a better way, showed me that revenge isn't the answer. That's worth more than any reputation." But Charlie could see the cost in his face, in the new lines around his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. He'd given up his chance at justice, chosen mercy instead, and this was his reward: scandal, accusations, and potential professional ruin. She turned away, unable to bear it anymore. "I'll pack my things." In her room, Charlie moved mechanically, placing folded clothes into the suitcase Roman had provided. Each item felt heavy with meaning: the soft sweaters she'd come to love, the comfortable shoes for walking in the garden, the books she'd collected. All of it represented a brief moment of peace, of safety, that was now ending. The city hummed beyond her window, indifferent to the pain inside the penthouse. Cameras flashed occasionally from the street below, like artificial stars. Charlie zipped the suitcase closed, each click of the zipper feeling final, decisive. This was how it ended, not with revenge or victory, but with quiet retreat. She'd brought chaos into Roman's ordered world, and now she had to leave before it destroyed everything he'd built. Charlie sat on the edge of the bed, her packed suitcase beside her, and waited for Samuel to tell her it was time to go. The room that had become her sanctuary now felt like a beautiful cage, and she was about to walk away from it forever. The city blurred past the car windows as Samuel drove Charlie through the dark streets. She sat motionless in the back seat, her small suitcase beside her, feeling oddly detached from everything happening around her. The headlines and accusations seemed to belong to someone else, some other Charlie Johnson who had supposedly schemed and manipulated her way into Roman's life. Pastor Evelyn was waiting at the side entrance of the church, her warm presence a beacon in the cold night. She wrapped Charlie in a tight hug, whispering words of welcome that barely penetrated the fog surrounding Charlie's mind. "Let's get you settled," Pastor Evelyn said softly, leading Charlie through the quiet halls to the small apartment above the church offices. The space was simple but welcoming. A bedroom, bathroom, and sitting area with a tiny kitchenette. Someone had already stocked the fridge and left fresh flowers on the table. Charlie set her suitcase down mechanically. "Thank you. I don't know how long." "Stay as long as you need," Pastor Evelyn assured her. "This is a safe place." But safety felt hollow now. Charlie had tasted real safety, in Roman's quiet strength, in his determination to protect her, in the way he'd chosen mercy over vengeance. And now that was gone. The next morning brought more headlines. Charlie saw them on her phone before she could stop herself. Caldwell Industries CEO under fire. Board demands answers. Mystery woman's past revealed. Her mother had been thorough, feeding carefully crafted stories to every outlet that would listen. Pastor Evelyn brought breakfast and sat with Charlie as she picked at her toast. "You don't have to look at the news," she said gently. "I need to know." Charlie replied, "I need to see what they're saying about him." The stories grew worse throughout the day. Old photos surfaced, carefully selected shots that made innocent moments look suspicious. Former classmates sold stories about Charlie's troubled past. Financial experts speculated about Roman's motivations and business practices. By afternoon, the headline Charlie had been dreading appeared. Breaking: Roman Caldwell steps down as CEO. She read the article with trembling hands. Roman had resigned effectively immediately, citing personal reasons and a desire to protect the company's reputation. The board's statement was coolly professional, accepting his resignation while announcing an interim leadership team. "He didn't have to do this," Charlie whispered to the empty room. "He could have fought back, told everyone the truth about my mother." But she knew why he hadn't. Exposing Lorraine would have meant exposing Charlie's humiliation to the world. Even now, facing professional ruin, he was protecting her. The days that followed passed in a grey haze. Charlie moved through them like a ghost, helping at the church when she could, trying to keep busy. She thought about calling Roman 100 times, but what would she say? Their separation was necessary. They both knew it. Any contact would only fuel the media frenzy. Pastor Evelyn watched over Charlie with quiet concern, offering support without pressure. She made sure Charlie ate, gently encouraged her to rest, and never once asked for explanations Charlie wasn't ready to give. A week after leaving the penthouse, Charlie sat in Pastor Evelyn's office, staring out the window at the rain. "I feel so empty," she admitted. "Like everything that happened was a dream, and now I'm back in the real world where nothing good lasts." "Good things do last, Charlie," Pastor Evelyn said softly. "But sometimes they look different than we expect. Would you consider joining our Wednesday night women's prayer group? It might help to be around others who understand." Charlie's first instinct was to refuse. The thought of facing strangers, of being vulnerable, made her want to retreat further into herself. But she heard herself saying yes, perhaps because anything was better than the numbness. Wednesday evening found her sitting in a circle with 8 other women in the church basement. They were different ages, different backgrounds, but there was something in their eyes Charlie recognized. A familiar weariness, a hard-won wisdom. One by one, they shared their stories. Sarah talked about her husband's addiction and betrayal, how she'd found strength in forgiveness. Maria described rebuilding her life after her business partner stole everything. Rebecca spoke about her mother's emotional abuse, tears flowing freely as she described learning to set boundaries. Charlie sat quietly, listening. These women had all faced betrayal, loss, judgment. They'd all felt alone, scared, worthless. But here they were, supporting each other, praying together, finding hope in shared experience. "Would you like to share anything?" Pastor Evelyn asked gently when the others had finished. Charlie looked around the circle at these strong, wounded, healing women. "I trusted someone I shouldn't have," she said softly, "and someone else paid the price for trying to help me." The women nodded in understanding. No one asked for details or offered easy solutions. Instead, they simply reached out, taking her hands, forming an unbroken circle of support. As they prayed together, Charlie felt something crack in her chest, not the sharp pain of breaking, but the gentle release of ice beginning to thaw. These women's stories reminded her that she wasn't alone, that survival was possible, that healing could come in unexpected ways. The numbness began to recede, replaced by something more complex. Grief mixed with gratitude, loss tangled with hope. Charlie closed her eyes as the prayers continued around her, each voice a reminder that even in the darkest moments, no one walks alone. The morning dawned grey and misty as Charlie sat in Pastor Evelyn's kitchen, watching rain trickle down the window pane. Her phone buzzed quietly on the table. Another message from the investigator handling Roman's case. She had been getting these messages for 3 days now, each one more urgent than the last. "They found something," Charlie said quietly, reading the latest text. "Inconsistencies in my mother's story, bank records that don't match her claims, witnesses whose accounts contradict her version of events." Pastor Evelyn set a steaming mug of tea in front of Charlie. "What are they asking you to do?" "They want me to testify, to tell my side of the story." Charlie wrapped her hands around the warm mug, drawing comfort from its heat. "They say it could help clear Roman's name." "And how do you feel about that?" Charlie stared into her tea, watching ripples form as her hands trembled slightly. Scared, angry, confused. She took a shaky breath. "All my life I've protected her, covered for her, made excuses. Even after everything she's done, some part of me still wants to shield her." "That's natural," Pastor Evelyn said gently. "She's your mother. But she's also hurt so many people, not just me, not just Roman." Charlie looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "If I stay silent now, aren't I helping her hurt others?" The older woman reached across the table, covering Charlie's hand with her own. "Why don't we pray about it? Take tonight to listen for God's guidance." That evening, Charlie knelt beside her bed in the guest room, pouring out her heart in prayer. The streetlights cast soft shadows on the wall as hours passed, her whispered words filling the quiet room. "Lord, show me the right path," she prayed. "Not for revenge, not for justice, but for truth. Help me speak with love, even when it hurts. Help me remember that my mother is your child too, as broken and lost as I've been." As midnight approached, Charlie felt a strange peace settling over her. The answer wasn't about destroying her mother or protecting her, it was about standing in truth, whatever the cost. The next morning, Charlie called the investigator. "I'll testify," she said firmly. "But I have conditions. I won't speculate or assign blame. I'll only speak to what I personally experienced and witnessed." The testimony was scheduled for 2 days later. Charlie chose her clothes carefully, a simple blue dress that made her feel strong but not severe. Pastor Evelyn drove her to the law office where the deposition would take place. The conference room was intimidating, all polished wood and leather chairs. Cameras were set up to record everything. Charlie's hands shook as she took her seat, but her voice remained steady as she swore to tell the truth. What followed was 4 hours of careful questioning. Charlie described the lunch with her mother, the drugged drink, waking in Roman's penthouse. She detailed the weeks that followed, Roman's unexpected kindness, his eventual change of heart, her mother's retaliation. Through it all, Charlie maintained her composure. When asked about her mother's motives, she simply said, "I can't speak to what was in her heart, I can only tell you what happened." When questioned about Roman's treatment of her, Charlie was clear and direct. "He never harmed me. When he realized revenge wouldn't heal anything, he chose to help people instead. He gave up everything to protect others from being hurt." Miles away, in a quiet office, Roman watched the live stream of Charlie's testimony. His Aunt Ruth sat beside him, both of them silent as Charlie spoke. Her quiet strength, her refusal to demonize anyone, even those who had hurt her, touched something deep in Roman's heart. "She's remarkable," Ruth said softly. Roman nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. He watched as Charlie handled each question with grace, neither minimizing the harm done nor seeking vengeance. She simply told the truth, letting it stand on its own. As the day progressed, social media began buzzing. Clips from Charlie's testimony circulated, showing her dignity and compassion. People who had been quick to judge began questioning their assumptions. Charlie Speaks Truth started trending by mid-afternoon. Former employees came forward with stories about Roman's integrity and fairness. Business partners spoke up about his ethical practices. Slowly but surely, the narrative began to shift. Charlie avoided looking at any of it. After her testimony, she returned to Pastor Evelyn's house, emotionally drained but at peace. She had done what she needed to do, not for revenge, not for justice, but for truth. That evening, she sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft pinks and golds. Pastor Evelyn brought out 2 glasses of lemonade, settling into the chair beside her. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Charlie considered the question carefully. "Lighter," she finally said. "Like I've been carrying this heavy secret for so long, and now it's out in the open where God can heal it." "You did a brave thing today," Pastor Evelyn said. "Speaking truth with love is never easy. I kept thinking about what you said in Bible study last week, about how light displaces darkness not by fighting it, but simply by shining." Charlie smiled softly. "I just had to let the truth shine." Inside, Charlie's phone continued to buzz with notifications as public opinion shifted and reformed. But she didn't check it. She had done what needed to be done. The rest was in God's hands. The truth had a way of spreading like morning light, gradually but unstoppably illuminating every shadowed corner. In the days following Charlie's testimony, evidence began surfacing that painted a devastating picture of Lorraine Johnson's activities over the years. Financial records emerged showing a pattern of fraud spanning more than 15 years. Bank statements revealed multiple shell companies. Former business partners came forward with stories of manipulation and theft. What had started as an investigation into one family's destruction had uncovered a web of deception that stretched far beyond Roman's brother. Detective Sarah Martinez sat at her desk, reviewing the final pieces of evidence. The case against Lorraine Johnson was ironclad. "We're moving to arrest this afternoon," she informed her supervisor. "Multiple counts of wire fraud, financial exploitation, and criminal conspiracy." When they called Charlie to inform her of the impending arrest, her response surprised them. "Thank you for letting me know," she said quietly. "But I won't be there. I've chosen peace." The detective paused. "You have every right to witness her arrest, Ms. Johnson, after everything she's done." "That's exactly why I can't be there," Charlie explained. I won't let this moment define either of us. She's still my mother, and I'm choosing to pray for her instead. As police cars pulled up to Lorraine's expensive townhouse that afternoon, Charlie was volunteering at Pastor Evelyn's food pantry, sorting cans and filling boxes for families in need. She worked steadily, focusing on each item, each box, each act of service that could bring light instead of darkness into the world. Lorraine's arrest made headlines within hours. Security cameras captured her being led out in handcuffs, her carefully maintained facade cracking as reporters shouted questions. The woman who had spent years manipulating others finally faced the consequences of her actions. Roman watched the coverage from his Aunt Ruth's kitchen, where late afternoon sunlight streamed through wide windows. Ruth set a cup of tea in front of him, settling into the chair across the table. Her presence was steady, comforting in its familiarity. "How do you feel?" she asked gently. Roman stared into his tea, considering the question carefully. "I expected to feel satisfied," he admitted. "I spent years planning revenge, imagining this moment, but instead I feel free," Ruth suggested. "Yes." The realization seemed to surprise him. All this time, I thought justice meant making her hurt like we hurt. But Charlie was right. Revenge would have kept me chained to the past. Ruth reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Your brother would be proud of you, Roman. Not for taking revenge, but for choosing to let it go. I keep thinking about what Charlie said during her testimony, about truth being enough on its own." Roman shook his head. "I had all this power, all these resources, and in the end, it was her simple honesty that brought everything to light. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is let go of control." Ruth said, "You've spent years building walls of wealth and influence to protect yourself. Maybe it's time to see what life looks like without them." Roman nodded slowly. The thought of walking away from his corporate empire would have terrified him a few months ago. Now it felt like taking off a heavy coat he'd been wearing too long. "I'm stepping down permanently," he said. "Not just from the CEO position, from everything. The board can restructure without me." "And what will you do instead?" A small smile touched Roman's face. "Start over. Maybe use what I've learned to help other families avoid what happened to ours. I've seen how money and power can destroy people from the inside out. Maybe it's time to build something different." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "That sounds like healing to me." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun began to set, painting the kitchen in warm, golden light. On the television, reporters were still discussing Lorraine's arrest, but Roman reached over and turned it off. That chapter was closing. What mattered now was what came next. "I've been thinking about setting up a foundation," he said after a while. "Something focused on helping families affected by financial fraud. Not just legal support, but counseling, rebuilding resources, all the things we didn't have when everything fell apart." Ruth smiled. "That sounds like turning darkness into light." "I learned that from Charlie," Roman admitted. "She showed me that you don't fight darkness by becoming it. You overcome it by choosing to shine brighter." The kitchen grew dim as evening settled in, but neither of them moved to turn on the lights. Sometimes, Roman was learning, you had to sit in the darkness for a while to appreciate the dawn that was coming. He felt lighter than he had in years, unburdened by the weight of revenge he'd carried for so long. "Thank you," he said suddenly. Ruth looked at him questioningly. "For never giving up on me," he explained. "For praying even when I pushed everyone away. For believing God could restore what looked permanently broken." Ruth's eyes softened with understanding. "That's what family does," she said simply. "We hold on to hope for each other until we're ready to hold it for ourselves." As night fell outside the windows, Roman felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. The path ahead was uncertain, But for the first time in years, that didn't frighten him. He had spent so long believing power was the only protection against pain. Now he understood that true strength came from something much simpler: the courage to begin again. The seasons shifted quietly as healing began to take root. Late summer mellowed into autumn, painting the city streets with splashes of gold and crimson. For Charlie, each day brought small steps forward, away from the shadows of her past. In her tiny apartment near Pastor Evelyn's church, Charlie spread her course materials across a second-hand desk. The non-profit management textbooks were highlighted and dog-eared, filled with sticky notes in her neat handwriting. The educational fund Roman had given her opened doors she'd never imagined possible. Each class felt like unwrapping a gift, learning about organizational structures, grant writing, and program development. "You're a natural at this," her professor had said after she presented her first project proposal. "You understand what people need because you've lived it." Those words stayed with her, transforming what had been pain into purpose. During breaks between classes, Charlie would sit in the church garden, notebook in hand, sketching out ideas for what would become Haven's Heart, her vision for a support network for women betrayed by family members. The first meeting drew just 3 women, gathering nervously in the church basement with styrofoam cups of coffee. But Charlie recognized the look in their eyes, the same mixture of hurt and hope she saw in her own mirror each morning. "Sometimes the people who should love us the most are the ones who wound us deepest," she said softly, opening that first session. "But that doesn't have to be the end of our story." Week by week, the group grew. Word spread quietly through Pastor Evelyn's network. Soon they needed more chairs, more coffee cups, more tissues for tears shed in understanding. Charlie learned to hold space for their anger without letting it consume them, to guide conversations toward healing rather than bitterness. Meanwhile, across town, Roman was building his own new beginning. He started small, helping set up chairs for Sunday services, sorting donations for the food bank, learning the names of regular volunteers. No one recognized him as the former CEO whose face had been splashed across business magazines. Here, he was just Roman, the quiet man who always arrived early and stayed late. They exchanged letters, careful at first, then gradually more open. Charlie wrote about her classes, about the women finding their voices in the support group. Roman shared stories about rediscovering simple joys, cooking his own meals, reading books that weren't about business strategy, watching the sunset without checking his phone. "I never knew peace could feel so rich," he wrote in one letter. "All those years chasing power, and it turns out what I really needed was the courage to be still." Charlie kept his letters in a wooden box beside her bed, each one a reminder that transformation was possible. She wrote back about her dreams for Haven's Heart, about wanting to create something that would outlast the pain that inspired it. As autumn deepened into winter, Charlie found herself working late into the evening, preparing to launch Haven's Heart as an official non-profit. The coursework was challenging, but she approached it with the same quiet determination that had carried her through darker days. She learned about board governance, liability insurance, and the complex dance of non-profit funding. Roman's path took its own shape. He sold his penthouse, moving to a modest house with a small garden. His Aunt Ruth helped him plant winter vegetables, kale and carrots that would grow strong in the cold. On Sundays, he sat in the back pew at church, no longer hiding but learning to simply be present. Their letters continued, bridging the careful distance between them. Neither pushed for more than the other was ready to give. There were no dramatic declarations, no rushed promises. Instead, they shared the small victories of rebuilding: Charlie's first successful grant application, Roman's first homegrown salad. As winter began to soften toward spring, Charlie sat at her desk late one evening, staring at a cream-colored invitation. Haven's Heart was ready to open its doors officially, a warm, welcoming space where healing could take root. She had written Roman's name on the envelope, her handwriting steady despite her nervousness. "Dear Roman," she wrote on the accompanying note, "you once gave me the chance to start over. I'd be honored if you would come see what grew from that gift." She sealed the envelope carefully, adding it to the stack of invitations for the opening ceremony. Outside her window, the first crocuses were pushing through the soil, tiny purple promises that winter never had the final word. The support group had grown to over 20 regular members now, women who were learning to trust again, to dream again. They had helped paint the center's walls in soft, welcoming colors. One had sewn curtains, another had donated comfortable chairs. Together, they were creating the safe space they had each needed in their darkest moments. Charlie placed Roman's invitation in her outgoing mail, then turned back to her work. There were still grants to write, programs to develop, and women to support. But now each step forward felt like walking toward light rather than running from shadows. That night, as she locked up the center, Charlie paused to look at the simple sign above the door. Haven's Heart, where healing begins. She thought about how far she had come from that terrifying day in the restaurant with her mother. How grace had shown up in unexpected places, turning what was meant for harm into something beautiful. She thought of Roman's last letter, where he had written about planting spring bulbs in his garden. "Sometimes," he had said, "hope looks like putting something broken into soil and trusting it will bloom again." The stars were just beginning to appear as Charlie walked home, the evening air carrying the first hints of spring. She had invited Roman back into her story, not knowing how this chapter would unfold. But she had learned that some of life's most precious gifts come not in grand gestures, but in the quiet courage to begin again. The morning of Haven's Heart's opening dawned clear and bright, the kind of spring day that felt like a gift. Charlie arrived early, her hands trembling slightly as she unlocked the front door. The space welcomed her with the familiar scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. Volunteers bustled around, arranging chairs in neat rows, setting up refreshments on fold-out tables, and hanging a simple banner that read, "Welcome to Haven's Heart." Each detail had been carefully planned over the past months, but seeing it come together made Charlie's heart swell with gratitude. "The flowers just arrived," called Sarah, one of the support group members who had become a dear friend. She carried in arrangements of white lilies and purple irises, flowers that spoke of hope and new beginnings without being overly formal. Charlie smoothed her navy blue dress, chosen for its quiet professionalism rather than flash. Her mother would have called it plain, but Charlie knew now that true worth had nothing to do with designer labels or turning heads. She touched the small cross pendant at her neck, centering herself in prayer, as she had learned to do in moments of uncertainty. People began arriving at 10 o'clock, social workers, counselors, church members, and women from the support group. Each familiar face reminded Charlie that she wasn't alone anymore. Pastor Evelyn arrived early, enveloping Charlie in a warm hug that felt like coming home. "God is faithful," Pastor Evelyn whispered. "Look what he's done with your willingness to trust him." At 10:30, Charlie noticed a familiar figure slip quietly into the back row. Roman was dressed simply in a grey suit, his presence understated but unmistakable. Their eyes met briefly across the room, and Charlie felt a flutter of emotion she couldn't quite name, not fear or attraction, but something deeper. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. As 11 o'clock approached, Pastor Evelyn stepped forward to welcome everyone and open with prayer. Charlie took her place at the small podium, her prepared speech trembling slightly in her hands. She looked out at the gathered faces, Some she knew well, others she would come to know. Her voice, when she began speaking, was steady and clear. "Welcome to Haven's Heart," she began. "This center exists because of a truth I learned in the hardest way possible, that healing isn't just about surviving trauma. It's about choosing to believe in goodness even when evidence points to darkness." She shared briefly about her own journey, careful not to sensationalize or seek sympathy. Instead, she focused on the transformation that had taken place, not just in her circumstances, but in her heart. "I stand here today grateful for many things," she continued. "Grateful for a God who specializes in turning ashes into beauty. Grateful for a community that showed me what real love looks like. And grateful for the courage to choose forgiveness, not because anyone deserved it, but because bitterness is too heavy a burden to carry into a new beginning." From his seat in the back, Roman listened intently. Tears gathered in his eyes as Charlie spoke about redemption, about the difference between justice and revenge. He thought about his own journey, how her quiet faith had challenged everything he thought he knew about power and healing. After the formal ceremony, as people mingled over coffee and cookies, Roman waited patiently. He watched Charlie move through the crowd, greeting people with genuine warmth, her smile reaching her eyes in a way it hadn't when they first met. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, Charlie made her way to where Roman stood near the back wall. They found themselves alone in a quiet corner, the afternoon sun streaming through newly hung curtains. "Thank you for coming," Charlie said softly. "Thank you for inviting me," Roman replied. His voice held none of its old coldness. "This place, it's remarkable. Like you." Charlie shook her head slightly. "Not remarkable, just willing to believe in something bigger than pain." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both aware of how far they'd come from that first terrible morning in the penthouse. "I never properly thanked you," Charlie said finally. "Not for the money or the opportunity, though I'm grateful for both, but for choosing to stop, for showing me that people can change when they want to badly enough." Roman's eyes grew damp again. "You showed me that first," he said quietly. "I thought I was rescuing you, but you ended up saving me from myself." Charlie touched his arm gently. "Maybe that's how grace works best, when we stop trying to control it and just let it flow through us to others." The afternoon light was softening toward evening. Most of the guests had departed, leaving behind empty coffee cups and the lingering warmth of celebration. "Would you like to take a walk?" Roman asked. "There's a park nearby." Charlie nodded, gathering her purse and saying goodbye to the remaining volunteers. They stepped out into the spring evening together, their pace unhurried. They weren't a couple, might never be one, but they walked with the comfortable awareness of two people who had seen each other at their worst and chosen to believe in better. The park was quiet, cherry blossoms drifting on the breeze like pink snow. They walked in companionable silence, two people changed by grace, bound not by rescue or obligation, but by mutual respect and the shared experience of choosing light over darkness. Neither felt the need to define what would come next. For now, it was enough to walk side by side in the gathering dusk, their shadows stretching long behind them, their faces turned toward the setting sun. The late afternoon shadows lengthened across the center's freshly painted walls as Charlie moved through the rooms, straightening chairs and collecting forgotten programs. The space still hummed with the lingering energy of the day's celebration, though the last guests had departed over an hour ago. She paused at each window, drawing the blinds with careful attention, her movements unhurried and purposeful. Through the front windows, she could see Roman waiting patiently on the sidewalk, his tall figure silhouetted against the sunset. The sight stirred something in her chest, not romance exactly, but a deep appreciation for how far they'd both come. Charlie gathered her belongings, checking one last time that everything was in its place. The center felt alive with possibility, even in stillness. Pictures of hope and healing adorned the walls, not generic stock photos, but real women who had found their way forward. Their stories were different from hers, but the thread of resilience ran through them all. At the main desk, she picked up her keys, running her fingers over the fresh metal. These keys represented so much more than just access to a building. They were tangible proof that good could come from darkness, that pain could birth purpose. The security system beeped softly as she entered the code. 4 digits that represented new beginnings. Charlie stepped outside into the cool evening air, turning to lock the heavy front door. The click of the deadbolt echoed with finality. "Ready?" Roman asked quietly as she descended the steps. Charlie nodded, adjusting her purse strap on her shoulder. "Thank you for waiting." They fell into step together, their pace matching naturally as they headed down the tree-lined street. The spring evening was gentle around them, cherry blossoms drifting on the breeze like nature's confetti celebrating new life. After a few moments of comfortable silence, Charlie spoke softly. "You know, I've been thinking about that first morning, when I woke up in your penthouse." Roman's step faltered slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "I was so terrified." She continued, "Not just of what might happen to me, but of what it meant that my own mother had." She took a steadying breath. "But looking back now, I can see how God was working even then, especially then." They passed beneath a streetlight, just flickering to life in the gathering dusk. Roman's voice was thoughtful when he responded. "I thought I owned you. That's the truth of it. Harsh as it sounds now. I thought money could buy anything, even justice." Charlie glanced at him, noting how different he looked from those early days. The hard edges had softened, though the strength remained. "But you never really owned me," she said quietly. "I was sold, yes, but ownership? That requires something money can't buy." They paused at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. Roman turned to face her fully. "No, I never owned you. Your spirit remained free even when everything else was taken. That's what began to change me, I think. Watching how you maintained your dignity, your faith, even in circumstances that should have destroyed both." The walk signal blinked on, and they crossed together. Charlie considered his words before responding. "I was drugged." She acknowledged, the memory still bitter. "But not destroyed. Betrayed, but not broken. Sometimes I think that's the real miracle, not just surviving, but emerging with my heart intact." They walked another block in contemplative silence. The neighborhood was quiet, porch lights beginning to wink on as evening settled more firmly around them. "Losing everything saved me," Roman said suddenly, his voice carrying a weight of revelation. "The company, the position, the power. I thought those things made me who I was, defined my worth, but losing them..." He shook his head slowly. "Losing them showed me who I could be without them." Charlie smiled gently. "Sometimes we have to lose what we think we need, to find what we actually need." They were approaching her apartment building now, its brick facade warm in the last rays of sunlight. Charlie's steps slowed as they neared the entrance, neither quite ready to end the conversation. "The center," Roman said, gesturing back the way they'd come. "It's going to help a lot of women find their way forward." "That's my prayer," Charlie agreed. "That it becomes a place where healing happens, where women learn their worth more than their worst experiences." She turned to face him fully. "Thank you again, Roman. Not just for the funding, but for being willing to change, for choosing something better than revenge." Roman's eyes were gentle in the gathering darkness. Thank you for showing me that mercy is stronger than vengeance. I never understood that before." They stood for a moment in the soft evening air, both aware that this was a kind of ending, but also a beginning. No dramatic declarations or promises, just quiet acknowledgement of growth and possibility. "Good night, Roman," Charlie said softly, reaching for her building key. "Good night, Charlie," he responded, waiting until she was safely inside before turning away. Charlie climbed the stairs to her apartment, each step carrying her further into her future. Outside her window, the city was settling into evening, lights twinkling like earth-bound stars. She thought about mercy, how costly it could be, how it demanded everything sometimes. But she also thought about its dividends, peace that money couldn't buy, healing that vengeance could never achieve, freedom that came from releasing the need to punish. She turned on her apartment lights, setting her keys on the small table by the door. The day's programs spilled from her purse, Haven's Heart, a place of healing and hope, printed in gentle colors across the top. Charlie smiled, touching the words lightly. Yes, mercy was costly, but its rewards, those were eternal. Outside her window, the last light of day painted the sky in shades of promise. Charlie stood for a moment, watching as stars began to appear, each one a reminder that light always found its way through darkness. She had been sold but never owned, wounded but never destroyed, and in that truth lay the seeds of countless new beginnings, for her, for the women who would find Haven's Heart, and yes, even for Roman. The night settled fully around the city, wrapping it in gentle darkness. But this darkness held no terror. It was simply the pause between one day and the next, the quiet space where hope took root and mercy did its deepest work. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe. And tomorrow, I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.